Yeah.
It only takes a few notes, 3 seconds of a song you haven't heard in 20 years. And suddenly you're not here anymore. You're 17 again. You're riding in a car with the windows down. You're standing in your childhood kitchen. You're dancing with someone who's no longer here. You're walking down an aisle, rocking a baby, sitting beside a hospital bed, trying to survive a season you weren't sure you would survive. Nothing in the room has changed, but something inside you has. A melody opened a door. And on the other side was a version of you that had been waiting to be remembered. That is the power of music. Music can travel past language, logic, and time. It can find places in us that words cannot reach. Music, and sometimes when we have lost our way, a song knows how to bring us home. What song holds your story? Welcome to Human Being with Dr. Susan. I'm Susan Hendrich, and this is the place where we slow down long enough to notice the rhythm inside of us and become more human in the way we live, lead, love, and respond. Today we're talking about music. Not music theory, not whether vinyl sounds better than digital, not who produced the greatest album of all time, although I understand some of you might already be preparing your arguments on the greatest album of all time. We're talking about what music does to us. Why a familiar melody can bring back an entire chapter of life. Why some songs make us cry before we understand why. Why music can help us remember and grieve, connect, worship, move, celebrate, and endure. Why we turn it up before or after a difficult day. Why we play it softly beside someone who is sick. Why a crowd of strangers can become one voice when the chorus arrives. And why there are moments when a song seems to know us better than we know ourselves. I want you to think of one song right now. Not necessarily your favorite song. Just think of the song that finds you instantly. The song that changes the temperature inside you. The song that belongs to a person, a place, season, or earlier version of yourself. Hold on to it. We're going to come back to it. Here's a song I wrote.
Yeah. Yeah. Human being, fall and go on your path inside, you know. Human being, face the sun, take your chances, flow as one.
Now, if you listen to my podcast, you know that song. I wrote it and I produced it and I play it all the time. And it got me thinking about where music fits into my life. And now I'm curious about where music fits into your life. We don't know where and when music began. The first instrument was not carved from bone or stretched with strings. It might have been the human body. A voice calling across the dark. Hands clapping in rhythm. Feet striking the ground. A mother humming to a child before either of them had words for comfort. Now, the oldest widely accepted musical instruments are flutes carved from bird bone and mammoth ivory, roughly 40,000 years ago. But music must be older than the instruments that survived. Wood decays, drums disappear, voices leave no fossils. And the archaeological record can tell us when human beings began carving music into objects. It cannot tell us, though, when we first sang. Now, thousands of years later, People in ancient Mesopotamia began placing music into writing. And by about 1400 BCE, someone in the city of Ugarit pressed instructions for a hymn into a clay tablet. That song was dedicated to Nikal, a goddess associated with orchards and fertility. Imagine that. A person living more than 3,000 years ago wanted a melody to outlast that moment. They couldn't record the voice. They couldn't save an MP3 audio file, so they pressed the music into clay. And perhaps that's what human beings have always asked music to do: hold on to what would otherwise disappear. A voice, a prayer, a memory, a person, a moment in time. And long before playlists, radio, records, streaming, Spotify subscriptions, we were already trying to keep the song. Let's think about Tony Bennett's final chapter. Tony Bennett spent more than 7 decades singing. His voice became connected with elegance, romance, New York, memory, and one especially famous city by the Bay. In 2021, Tony Bennett's family revealed that he'd been living with Alzheimer's for several years, and he sometimes struggled with ordinary conversation and understanding what was happening around him. But when the music started, something changed. Tony could rehearse, he could interpret songs, and he could step onto a stage. During his final public performances with Lady Gaga, Tony Bennett appeared to reconnect with the musical identity he had built over a lifetime. The disease didn't disappear. Music hadn't cured him, but the songs seemed to provide a path into abilities and parts of himself that remained accessible. And that distinction matters. Music is not magic. It doesn't reverse dementia, at least as far as we know just yet. But studies and clinical observations suggest that musical memory and responsiveness may sometimes remain partly preserved even as other abilities decline. Familiar music might support communication, engagement, mood, reminiscence, and aspects of self-awareness for some people living with dementia. So what does that mean for you? Sometimes the music is still there when the words are not. And sometimes inside the music, the person is still able to meet us. Before we had words, we had rhythm. Music begins before memory for us. Before babies understand language, they understand tone. A baby doesn't know the dictionary meaning of a lullaby, but the baby recognizes rhythm, repetition, cadence, the rise and fall of a familiar voice. A steady sound says you are held, you're not alone, someone is here. Long before we can explain our experience, our bodies respond to sound. So we soothe children by rocking and humming, singing and repeating. And regardless of culture, human beings sing during celebration and mourning and worship and courtship and protest and labor and war. We sing when ordinary language feels too small. I think that's perhaps because music isn't merely information, it is an experience, a sentence telling us something, but a song taking us into that concept and making us feel it. Music engages systems involved in movement, attention, emotion, reward, your imagination, and your memory. It doesn't remain confined to one small region of the brain. Music dances everywhere in our brains. That's why perhaps it feels so complete. It doesn't only address the thinking part of us, it speaks to the remembering part of us, the moving part, the longing part, the part that wants to belong, the part that still needs to be comforted. Music meets the whole person. So I'm going to tell you now about my father's tapping foot. Some of my earliest memories of music began when my father would sit behind a newspaper. Every Saturday morning, he would sit with the paper stretched out in front of him, absorbed in whatever he was reading. And he had these red leather slippers, and one of them was always dangling partially off of his foot. At first glance, he looked completely still in that chair, but underneath the newspaper, one foot was tapping. That's because on the radio or on the stereo, Hank Williams, Willie Nelson, Buck Owens, Fats Domino, Emmylou Harris, Johnny Cash, Beethoven. The music filled the room, and Dad's foot kept time. I'm a toddler, and I'm part of this scene. I'm dancing, I'm twirling. I'm moving through the room with the complete freedom of a child who has not yet learned to wonder whether anyone is watching. Dad didn't put down the newspaper and announce that he was teaching me about music. There was no formal lesson, no explanation of rhythm and genre, emotion, or memory. There was simply the music, his tapping foot, and me twirling in circles beside him. Looking back, I realized that this might be one of my first experiences of connection without conversation. Dad was reading, I was dancing, but we were inside the same song. His foot said, I hear it. My whole body answered, so do I. And that is how music often enters a life, not through instruction, but through atmosphere and repetition. Through the songs the adults in your life played while you as a child were becoming yourself nearby. What songs do you recall from early childhood? Well, long before I understood anything about radio, performance, memory, or the emotional power of sound, I knew that music could animate a room. It could move a quiet man behind a newspaper. It could move a toddler across the floor. It could connect two people who were not speaking at all. And perhaps some part of me has been dancing beside that tapping foot ever since. And by the way, every once in a while, a corner of the paper would be bent down, and Dad would look over and give me a thumbs up. My mom would sing to me with the voice of an angel, and I'm going to tell you a story about that later. But for now, I've spent a lot of my life behind a microphone like this. And there's a particular feeling that comes with putting on headphones, seeing the levels of the equalizer move, and realizing that your voice is about to travel somewhere you can't see. There's someone out there, you. You might be listening in a car. You might be making a meal. You might be just waking up from a nap. You might be sitting beside someone you love. Radio taught me that sound creates intimacy differently than almost anything else. You and I don't have to be in the same room. We never might meet again. But a voice, a pause, a laugh, a wink, and a piece of music can create the feeling that someone is sitting beside you. And I've noticed something else. I can prepare every word I want to say to you carefully. I can organize the idea, explain the research, but music can change the emotional meaning of the entire moment before I've said anything. A song can soften the room, create anticipation, open a memory, move your feet on that elliptical machine. Or it can make a listener feel understood before the conversation even begins when you say to yourself, yeah, me too. And that is humbling for someone who makes a living using words. Sometimes the words are not the most powerful sound. Now, the song that takes you back. Researchers call them music-evoked autobiographical memories. Memes, M-E-A-M, music-evoked autobiographical memories. That's the scientific term for what happens when a song suddenly returns you to a part of your story. These are not simply facts, they're lived memories. Your first day, our wedding, that summer, the night everything changed, the morning you received the call. The song that was playing. And in one foundational experiment using short excerpts from popular songs, about 30% of the excerpts of those songs triggered an autobiographical memory for people. And many of those memories were emotional and positive, with nostalgia among the most common reactions. 30% of people who were played a song had some sort of autobiographical connection to another part of their life. That means a random collection of songs can contain an astonishing number of doors. You don't carefully search your mental filing cabinet. The song just begins and the memory arrives, not merely as a list of facts, but as an atmosphere. You might remember the weather from that day, the color of the room, the perfume of the person beside you, the feeling of your body at that age. Music doesn't simply remind us what happened. It can briefly remind us how it felt to be the person to whom it happened. So there's this soundtrack theory of identity. These are my words. I have a theory of soundtrack identity. Our most meaningful songs don't merely store memories. They store versions of us. A song could hold the hopeful you, the heartbroken you, the rebellious you, the awkward, gawky braces and figuring out how to do your hair you, the courageous you, the person you were before life became complicated, the person you became because it did become complicated. When the song returns, it doesn't just retrieve an event, it retrieves part of an identity. Music is a portable form of selfhood, and you can guess where I'm going with this. I want to activate in you a superpower that you might not even realize you're carrying around with you, because music carries versions of us across time until we're ready to meet them again. That's the soundtrack theory of identity. If you know me well, you might know about John Denver pork chops. John Denver pork chops. My mother's famous John Denver pork chops. What is a John Denver pork chop, you might ask? So, we're kids, my brother and we would love to listen to my mom sing because she has the voice of an angel, a dove, and she loves music. And she would turn on music from John Denver or Cat Stevens, or, she'd take an album and she'd put it on. She absolutely loved John Denver. She knew the words to every one of his songs by heart. And I would love the honor of putting that 33 1/3 record on the turntable, and putting the needle on. So she was cooking dinner one afternoon, as she often did. She'd turn on the music really loud, and my brother and I would be dancing around and doing our thing. And she would join us once in a while between flipping items on the stovetop or shaking a spice jar. And she'd get so caught up in the music of John Denver that one particular day, the three of us were dancing in the living room and hanging out, having a great time. And my little brother, I think he was 4 years old, so I was probably 8. My little brother, Dave, said, Something smells like smoke. And we're dancing to John Denver, and my mom suddenly gets eyes the size of the dishes she's about to serve on and flies into the kitchen. And there, when my dad came home, served on the table were black pork chops, John Denver pork chops. The reason we call them this is because Mom was so enraptured in the joy of spending time with her kids, with the music, singing, that the pork chops burned. That song really awakened her heart from within so much that she blackened the pork chops, and the whole house filled with smoke. And my dad comes home and he said, "What is it?" And the two of them couldn't stop laughing. And so to this day, John Denver pork chops are a reminder of the power of music. The dinner wasn't great that night, but the moment was. That night, she was trying to prepare an experience for everyone, and she sure did. Here I am now, 50 plus years later, telling this story and remembering with such joy those precious times. The soundtrack of an imperfect, beautiful life. There's another term in psychology called the reminiscence bump. This is a fun one. Drop this one at a cocktail party. Music from adolescence and early adulthood often carries an unusually strong power. You might not remember why you walked into the kitchen, but your brain has apparently preserved every word of a Bon Jovi song you claimed not to like in 1987. Scientists sometimes do call this pattern the reminiscence bump. And what it means, older adults, as an example, have especially strong memories for music associated with adolescence and early adulthood. Those years when your identity, your independence, your relationships, and your life are really taking directional shape. So the research shows that songs connected with roughly ages 10 through 30 are especially likely to evoke strong autobiographical memories. These are the years of firsts. You know what I'm talking about. First freedom, first love, first heartbreak, first real risk, first glimpse of who we might become. The music isn't merely playing behind the event. It's part of the event, part of the friendship, part of the rebellion, part of the belonging. That baseball t-shirt I had of Van Halen that got so faded and worn over and over again, but it was an emblem of my identity and belonging as Jamie's crying. Those songs witnessed us becoming ourselves. Almost a year to the day after my grandmother died, I went to Zales jewelry store at Concord Mall when I was visiting Wilmington. I was with my mom and my aunt. And according to my mom and my Aunt Judy, Granny, when she died, wanted me to have something fun and frivolous as part of her legacy. And she did the same thing for my brother Dave. Dave had a home gym put in. I went to Zales. Not for something practical, not for something sensible, but for something joyful. I decided on a sapphire ring set in an emerald-style setting. It felt entirely extravagant, a little playful, exactly the kind of thing Granny would have appreciated. She called it pin money. While I was standing at the counter trying on this beautiful ring and feeling guilty about the thought of buying it, but supported on either side by my two great female role models, it was Christmas time, and "Oh Holy Night" began playing over the store's speakers. I'm getting goosebumps telling you this. Nearby stood a man who was shorter than I was, wrapped tightly in a wool coat with a European tied scarf, and he began to sing "Oh Holy Night." His voice was extraordinary, rich and clear and unexpectedly beautiful. The mall was about to close. It was dark outside. And the woman helping him behind the counter started joining in, singing "O Holy Night." And then another person began singing. And people from outside in the mall started to gather around this jewelry counter. And another were singing. And before I understood what was happening, people throughout the jewelry store were singing together. Customers, employees, strangers who had entered a store separately and suddenly now found themselves inside the same song. And I joined them. And my mom joined them. And Aunt Judy joined them. And we belted out the melody at the top of our lungs. "O night divine." I didn't worry about whether I was too loud. I didn't wonder what anyone thought. Joy simply overflowed from somewhere inside me. There I was, choosing a ring from my grandmother's legacy, surrounded by strangers singing one of her favorite songs, "O Holy Night." And in that moment, I knew Granny was there. Not in a way I could prove, but in a way I could feel. I had her fingerprints all over the moment. The surprise, the mischief twinkle in her eye, the beauty of something joyful appearing where no one had planned it, a song. Granny had wanted me to have a fun and frivolous gift, but somehow the gift became larger than the ring. The ring was something I could wear, and I still wear it at least twice a week to this day. The ring is something I could carry, but the song is something that became a part of me. For a few minutes, grief loosened its grip, and a jewelry store became a sanctuary, a concert hall, and strangers became the choir. And my grandmother's memory didn't feel like grief or an absence. It felt playful and near and alive. That is one of the things music can do. It can enter an ordinary place and make it sacred. It can gather people who don't know one another and give them one shared breath. Taking a moment of grief and without erasing the loss, fill it with unexpected joys. I went to Zales to choose a ring, but Granny, as usual, had something else planned. Thank you, Granny. Now, a little less known human story, songs of remembrance. Does this ring a bell? During COVID-19, NPR, National Public Radio, created a project called Songs of Remembrance, where families were invited to share music connected to the people they had lost in the pandemic. One person chose Tony Bennett's "I Left My Heart in San Francisco" because it captured a mother who loved Bennett, collected his albums, and sang along with him. Other songs in the project represented marriages, family rituals, humor, faith, personality, and ordinary moments that had become precious after loss. These were not a list of medical facts. They were musical portraits. And remember, there were people in hospitals that we couldn't touch or see. We had to be behind a glass wall, but music could connect us. The song said, "This is how we loved. This is what makes us laugh together. This is what the house sounded like when you were here." And that project, Songs of Remembrance, it revealed something profound. Sometimes one song can tell us more about a life than a formal biography ever could. A song can become a small container for an entire person. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "Without music, life would be a mistake." Now that may be dramatic. Nietzsche was not known for easing gently into a point, but he understood that music is not an ornamental part of life. It is one of the ways that we make life bearable and meaningful. Neuroscientist and musician Daniel Levitin spent years studying music's relationship with health and emotion and memory and pain and the brain. And when speaking about playing music himself, he described the best moments this way. He said, "If I'm lucky, I disappear and the music plays me. Ooh, that sentence captures something musicians and listeners both recognize. For a moment, self-consciousness loosens. Time changes. We stop managing the experience and we enter it. And there's research that tells us about the power of music. In 2025, a study followed more than 10,000 adults aged 70 and older. And those who reported listening to music most days had 39% lower risk of developing dementia than people who listened less frequently. Get your playlist ready. People who regularly played an instrument showed a 35% lower risk of dementia. These are substantial associations, and lots of new studies have been born out of that 2025 discovery. But they do require an important caution. The study was observational, so not causal, right? It doesn't prove that music alone caused the difference. But I'm interested, 39% lower risk of dementia. The association is striking enough to justify continued study. Music is not a prescription for immortality, but it might be one ingredient in a mentally, emotionally, and socially engaged and rich life. And there's no risk. No one's ever said, I know this playlist might support my brain health, but I simply can't tolerate another 3 minutes of Stevie Wonder. Actually, maybe someone has, but I would not understand that person. Now, a very painful moment in my life that might be one of the top 5 most beautiful. Tom and his paternal grandmother, Grandma Gertrude. She had Alzheimer's disease. And by the end of her life, Grandma Gertrude was far away from us, even though we lived down the street in Wichita. She had fallen several times and was confused and out of it much of the time. She stopped wanting to eat. She stopped wanting to try in many ways. There were long stretches when it was difficult to know what she understood, what she recognized, or how much of the room was reaching her. It broke my heart to see Grandpa Leo sitting next to her day after day, not knowing if she even knew that he was there. But 2 things still seemed to matter to Grandma Gertrude. 1, who was in the room, and 2, music. Near the end of her journey, the family gathered around her bedside. 6 grandchildren. Tom's the oldest. Tom's brother, Johnny. And 4 girls who are the cousins for Tom. 3 of them had arrived and flown in to Kansas. And we were singing songs that carried faith and comfort and child and love through the generations to her. Jesus loves me. You are my sunshine. He is Lord. Make me a channel of your peace. It brings tears to my eyes. On eagle's wings. By then, ordinary conversation was mostly beyond Grandma Gertrude. She wasn't speaking anymore, but her music was. Music became her final language. The 4th granddaughter arrived and was praying. We were all praying that Grandma would hang on long enough for her to arrive so that all 6 of the grandchildren could be there. And when she arrived, we sang one last song, Amazing Grace. We reached the words in the first verse, was blind, but now I see. And Grandma Gertrude smiled for the first time in a month. She took one final inhale, and she was gone. Her last utterance was music. Her final expression was a smile, as though the melody had reached a place that Alzheimer's had not completely stolen. as though for one brief moment something opened, something familiar, something clear, something like grace. And there was this other thing she seemed to know. She seemed to know who was in the room. The moment the last of the grandkids arrived, she had her last verse. No one knew exactly how much Grandma Gertrude could see or hear or understand, but somehow she seemed aware that her family wasn't yet complete, and she hung on. I can't prove that she was waiting. I can't explain what she knew in those final hours, but the people in the room, we felt it and we know it. And somewhere beneath the confusion, the falls, the silence, the disease, she still seemed to know something essential. These are my people, and not everyone is here yet. And the music will take me home. There are songs that lend us courage. So while I was preparing this moment for us today, I asked ChatGPT a question. What is the greatest hype song of all time? Guess what it was. Can you guess what the greatest hype song of all time is, according to ChatGPT? And I'll be doing Claude and Perplex. I'll be asking my other AIs later. But ChatGPT says the greatest hype song of all time is "Lose Yourself" by Eminem. That makes sense. It's a song about stakes and recognizing that a moment matters and stepping forward before you feel completely ready, even though you've got mom's spaghetti on your shirt. A hype song doesn't necessarily make fear disappear. Sometimes it gives fear a beat that you can walk to. Then I asked a more personal question of ChatGPT, and I triple dog dare you to do the same. I said, you know me, ChatGPT. What song best typifies me? Can you guess what song came up for me? ChatGPT chose the song "Times Like These," Foo Fighters, but actually the version performed by Live Lounge Radio. And that answer stayed with me because "Times Like These" is not about pretending difficult times are easy. It's about who we become inside those times, learning to live again, learning to give again, learning to trust life again after something has shifted or broken or asked more of us than we expected. That's what the right song can do. It can describe something about us before we know how to describe it ourselves. It can lend us courage. It can name the season. It can remind us that the hard moment is not the whole story. And sometimes for 3 minutes and 42 seconds, the song believes in us before we can believe in ourselves. Do you remember in high school dances or junior high school dances when the beat to the song "Moni Moni" would come on? What did you and your other awkward teenage friends do? You make eye contact and you say, "It's for us, man." Right? The song gives us courage that we might not have. It allows us to borrow strength. Before athletes compete, they listen to music. Before performers go on stage, they listen to music. Before difficult meetings, some of us sit in the parking lot and play one particular song at an unnecessarily high volume. We know what we're doing. We're changing our internal state. We're borrowing energy, borrowing certainty, borrowing courage. Because those are the days where confidence might not arrive naturally. We can't reason ourselves into it. Then the opening beat begins and our posture changes and we remember an earlier victory. The rhythm gives us momentum before our thoughts can catch up. For those 3 minutes and 42 seconds, that song reminds us of what we can do. Music can't do the difficult thing for you. It can't have the conversation, take the test, walk into the hospital, confront the situation, leave the unhealthy relationship, deliver the speech, or begin again. But music can walk us to the edge of that moment and help us access a braver version of ourselves, a calmer, freer, or more determined version. The song can become a portable emotional ritual. Press play, breathe, stand up, and go. When I do workshops for leaders, in fact, the more senior the leader, the more I love to do this activity. I have people stand up and choose their power pose and then choose the soundtrack to go with it. And I create a Spotify playlist and we go through that moment where we cue the music and the leader places themselves in their power pose and imagines themselves achieving the goal, the dream, the solution that they seek to create. Bridge over troubled water. Consider that song, the title, even without the lyrics or the music itself. The image is powerful. A bridge over troubled water. The troubled water remains, and the song doesn't promise that the river disappears. It offers a bridge. Isn't that what music often does? It doesn't remove grief or fear or illness or uncertainty. It creates a way across, not a permanent escape, but a passage, a place to put your feet while the water keeps moving beneath you. Music makes strangers into a chorus. If you've been to a concert, I can't count how many I've been to. Picture that concert. Thousands of people arriving separately, different lives, different beliefs, different histories, different reasons for needing that particular night. Then the song begins, the crowd recognizes it, and thousands of separate voices become one voice. A Bruce Springsteen concert does that like no other. Billy Joel. If I had to pick, I don't know if I could right now, but bringing us together. No one has to explain the words. In fact, tell me right now, type into the chat a comment of a concert that brought you together with strangers and created an experience where no one had to coordinate the feeling, but for a few moments, people who might agree on almost nothing know exactly when the beat drops and the chorus arrives. That is belonging that transcends style and intelligence and experiences and beliefs. It's not perfect agreement, but it's shared participation in an immersive moment that gives us structure where we feel together. We sing at birthdays. I love listening to a 5-year-old child sing the happy birthday song, especially if they sing it just from the bottom of their heart and the top of their lungs, and they don't even sound on key. They just know that they're a part of a moment. Just like David Gray, Tom gave us a moment the day after Scooby, our beloved cat, died. We went to see David Gray at the Trocadero, and we were flattened. It was our first loss. And David Gray played the song, Meet Me on the Other Side. And we started, I can feel it was a wall of tears. I was not in my human body in that moment. Meet me on the other side. It was Scooby talking to us, our little black cat, who in the end weighed less than 8 pounds. And we sang Scooby on the other side over and over again until that grief found a cup to pour from for a moment. Paula rocks out to Guns N' Roses. Where does that bring you when you turn on the jungle? Weddings, funerals, religious services, sporting events, graduations, protests, around campfires, in cars, in kitchens. We sing when we're united. And sometimes we sing in order to become united. A choir does not require, get it? A choir does not require every voice to sound the same. It requires people to listen, to enter at the right time, to leave space for each other and the music, to contribute without overpowering. That's not a bad model for community, people, or leadership, or love. Sergeant Ned Hosford passed away in February of 2004. He was my great uncle. He served in Germany and France as an army medic during World War II. And he came home with a handful of medals and a heart full of pain. So this is another family story I need to tell you. My aunt, Judy, whom you hear about all the time, gave his eulogy at his funeral in Chicago. Everybody knew him as Uncle Neddy. Sometimes he referred to himself as Acid Ned when he was in a mood. He was born in 1922. And during the war, while he served in Germany on the Austrian and German border, while he was away, his mother kept an empty chair and place setting for him at the family table. We don't know what he saw over there because he wouldn't talk about it. But all that time while he was there, an empty chair was left at the table for when he came home. That image says something about the family he came from. Even when someone is far away, their place remained. And when Ned came home, he became something of a family legend. He was generous and funny and loving, and according to family stories, he was occasionally reckless in the service of helping someone. So Judy told stories of times when he would help Grandpa, Judy and my mom's father, when he fell from the roof and was incapacitated for weeks. Uncle Ned came rushing over, and even with a war, even with the wounds he carried, he was there to help others. That's just who my uncle was. There were hubcap episodes, chasing runaway hubcap across a 6-lane Kennedy Highway in Chicago. But the story that Judy told that hit me the most was music. When Judy and my mom, Ginny, were sick with ordinary childhood illnesses of the time, measles and mumps and influenza, Uncle Ned would bring them books. But during one illness, he brought them a recording of the Nutcracker Suite. And that record opened a door. It introduced Mom and Judy to the world of classical music. And one extraordinary day, Uncle Neddy took Judy and my mom and his daughter, our cousin Anita, into the city to visit the Lion and Healy music store. If you've been to Chicago, you know that's a famous music store. And he said, you can each choose one instrument, any instrument you want. Can you imagine being a child and hearing, pick out any instrument you want? So Judy saw a glass display case and beelined over to it and saw what she now describes as the most beautiful instrument she had ever seen, a wooden recorder from Germany. And it became hers. And that began a lifetime of love for music. To this moment, in her 80s, she is on the board for the world's most well-known early music group of recorder players, Pifaro, here in Philadelphia. Judy studied recorder and piano. She publicly performed and performs to this day Gooseberry Geese and other fun songs that she and her group of aspirings play together. That's the beautiful thing about giving someone the gift of music. You're not just giving them an object. You're giving them a language, a refuge, a source of confidence, a community they haven't met yet, a part of themselves they haven't yet discovered. And music often travels this way. One person gets their first instrument. One person sings beside the bed of a dying family member. One person says, listen to this, and shares one of their earbuds. This made me think of you. And the sound keeps moving long after the giver is gone. So at Uncle Ned's funeral in 2004, Judy spoke about maintaining Uncle Ned's legacy of love and humor and generosity, but she was already living it. Every time she picks up that recorder, some part of Uncle Ned's gift continues. Music doesn't just help us remember a person. Sometimes it becomes the way a person keeps creating something in the world. My friend Matthew Zender sat with me in my car the last time we got to hang out before I retired and moved on to my new journey and he to his. And he sang me a song so beautiful, it makes me weep to this moment. And I can't tell you how grateful I was. I didn't expect him to do that, but he gave me that gift. He gave me that door to open and remember that I'm seen and known and loved, and that we are watched over by someone far more capable and enduring than any of us will ever be. So Uncle Ned gave Judy her first recorder, but he really gave her that door opening, and she walked through it, and the music keeps going to this day. Music helps us with grief and fear and hope. Why do we listen to sad songs? Have you ever purposely poked a wound and just turned on that song that you know is going to make you cry when you're already sad? Isn't that an unusual human choice? Imagine being cold and thinking, what I need now is some ice. Yet we do it. We play the song that matches the feeling. Sometimes cheerful music feels almost insulting when we're hurting. It's like cloyingly sweet frosting, when what we really need is to sit in our pain. A happy song would ask us to leave our real experience too quickly. Sad music doesn't ask that of us. Sad music doesn't tell us to cheer up. It sits down, it acknowledges the weather, and it says, yes, this hurts. And research suggests that music connected with autobiographical memories might evoke more sadness and negative emotion than other personally meaningful music. In other words, music that ties us to a moment in our time. But that emotional complexity isn't harmful, says the research. It reflects the depth of remembering, and it is a form of processing. The right song doesn't force us out of sadness. It helps us feel less alone inside it. Discernment matters here. Is the song helping me to feel something or helping me remain stuck? Am I releasing the emotion or rehearsing it? Sometimes we process sadness. Sometimes we give it a room, a television, and the Wi-Fi password, and a key to the garage. We need to know the difference. So other strong hype songs. What's your hype song? What's the song you put on to get yourself psyched up to do the hard thing? Sometimes we don't need a song to make us feel fearless. We need a song that helps us move while we're still afraid. Eye of the Tiger, Don't Stop Me Now, Thunderstruck, Stronger by Kanye, Till I Collapse by Eminem, We Will Rock You by Queen, The Greatest by Sia, Titanium. What are your hype songs? And I hear my dad's voice right now. Oh, those are all candy, recent music. Are you sure Hank would have done it this way? Because I'm not sure Hank done it this way. So I'm going to give you a challenge, and that is to create your playlist to help you with moments that matter. I want you to choose a song that sounds like home, a song that settles something inside you. For me, it's Morning Has Broken by my mom, a la Cat Stevens. A song that reminds you who you are. The song that you play when life makes you forget your strength. Jesus Loves Me is mine. Judge me, it's okay. A song that belongs to someone you love, a musical photograph of a person or a relationship. For me, it's anything by Josh Groban, because I'll never forget the day my granny called me up and said, Susabelle, there's someone who rivals Frank Sinatra. And if you knew my granny and her relationship with Frank Sinatra, nobody's even in that league. But she was so excited by this young man who had come onto the scene and taken her heart by storm, Josh Groban. She crushed on him to the day she died. A song that lets you feel what you've been avoiding. A song that opens an emotional door. For me, it goes back to another brick in the wall from childhood when I was mad at school for some reason. I don't know what it was, but we don't need no education. Boy, my mom was not pleased with that one. And then another song for you, a song that makes it difficult to stay still. And by the way, if you want to know how cool my mom is, she didn't like Another Brick in the Wall, but she would sing Highway to Hell with us at the top of her lungs. She was the cool mom. You have to know that. So a song that makes it difficult for you to stay still. No insight required, no personal growth objective, just aliveness. And the one I'm going to bring up, you might know if you've been listening to music recently. Have you seen on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the evening news, when, I can't remember his name, Mufasa, the dance, the guy, when they play the song, Gonna Make You Sweat by CNC Music Factory, and the song starts and Mufasa's saying, oh, you better kill it. And then the beat drops, and then you see somebody dancing outside the car as it's moving slowly along. What's a song that makes it impossible for you to stay still? It's Lose Yourself for me. My arm cannot stop automatically rocking. By the way, can you see this? If you're with me, not on the radio, if you're with me on video, you'll know. And for those of you on Sandcastle Radio, I am wearing a drum charm that my mother gave me when I became drum captain in high school. She was proud of me and she celebrated me. And to this day, it makes me feel special and connected to that drum line when we would play on Broadway, coming out onto the field before the football team would run through their paper sign, and me at the front with my broken sticks half the time, having the time of my life. So what does music do for you? Make that playlist of those 5 songs. One that sounds like home, one that reminds you who you are, one that belongs to someone you love, one you've been avoiding a feeling and it brings you there, and one that makes it hard to stay still. And be careful, people. Be careful what you put on repeat. A chorus becomes memorable through repetition, and so does a belief. I'm behind, I'm too much, I'm not enough, nothing ever works out, everyone eventually leaves. We might not sing those thoughts out loud, but we put them on repeat morning, afternoon, and night, and they stick. Choose your songs and your counter melodies wisely. That's my new term, counter melody. I'm going to pick a counter melody when I'm having a tough day. So I wrote you, to end our session today, I wrote you a haiku. Old songs open doors. Younger selves step through the sound. Time begins to sing. I want to thank you for joining me today. And go home and choose those 5 songs and send them to me or post them in a comment. Share today's episode with somebody who's forgotten their music or whose music inspires you, because music can't prevent every loss. It can't repair every relationship. It can't make every diagnosis disappear or guarantee that the next chapter will be easy, but it can sit beside us while we face what is there and give breath to what we cannot say. It can remind us that another human being has felt something like this before and turn memory into melody. As Matthew says, music is a window to the soul. It takes us back and it allows us to go forward. It's 11 o'clock Eastern, and you've been here with me on Human Being with Dr. Susan, right here on Sandcastle Radio. America's hottest online variety and music station. Go get that music for your weekend, people. And thanks again for joining me today. I'll see you next Saturday and every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern right here on Sandcastle Radio. Human Being with Dr. Susan. I'll see you next time.
Yeah.